Warning: this video contains images that may disturb some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. On February 1st, 1959, in the Upper Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union, a group of ski hikers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute spent their last evening of peace together about 1 mile up the slope of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl. Later that night, something seemed to inexplicably terrify them so much they cut themselves out of their tent, fleeing out underdressed in sub-zero temperatures to their deaths. Come with me to try to discover the truth of the Dyatlov Pass Incident as we look under the veil. In early 1959, Igor Dyatlov assembled a group of experienced ski hikers to go on an expedition to Ural Mountain, a journey of 217 miles, or about 349 kilometers. Ural in the local Mansi language means "don't go there." The ill-fated group of 9 set out as a group of 10. Igor Dyatlov, Yuri Doroshenko, Ludmila Dubinina, Yuri Krivonishchenko, Alexander Kolevatov, Zeneda Kolmogorov, Rustem Slobodin, Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, Simon Zolotaryov, and Yuri Yudin arrived on January 25th by train to a town in the northern province of Sverdlovsk Oblast called Vazai. They stayed for 2 days, resting up and preparing for their trek to Ural. They began their hike on January 27th. On January 28th, Yuri Yudin had to turn back due to extreme knee pain caused by rheumatism. That was the last time any of the other 9 were seen alive. What happened over the next few days can only be told through the group's diaries and the pictures taken by them. Weather conditions deteriorated, and they lost track of direction. They veered to the west toward a mountain called Kholat Syakhl. Kholat Syakhl, in the indigenous Mansi language, means dead mountain. They were about 10 kilometers from their intended destination. Inevitably, their expedition ended tragically, either late on February 1st or early in the morning on February 2nd. There are multiple theories of what happened to these young people, but first, let's go over what we know for sure. When the group failed to send word to their sports club by the 12th of February as planned, no one was initially concerned. Delays were common. However, when the 20th rolled around, the families began demanding a rescue mission. The sports club first sent a group of students and teachers that volunteered to help. They were later joined by the military and the militia. On February 26th, the abandoned campsite was discovered, and the rescuers were baffled. From what they could tell, the group had made slits in their tent at about eye level, then cut themselves out of the tent from the inside. Bits of fried ham and bacon were found inside, along with the hikers' shoes. Footprints were discovered going down the mountain slope in the direction of the tree line about 1.5 kilometers away. There, under the Siberian pines, they found the remains of a small fighter and the first 2 bodies. The bodies found were those of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishchenko. both only dressed in their underwear. The branches of the tree above them were broken about 5 meters up, suggesting one of them tried to climb the tree, either to survey the area or to collect firewood. Between the tree and the original campsite, the bodies of Kolmogorova, Slobodin, and the group's leader, Igor Dyatlov, were found. They appeared to be attempting to return to the tent. The other 4 bodies were not discovered until 2 months later on May 4th. They were in a ravine about 75 meters into the woods from the makeshift fire under about 4 meters of snow. They were more well-dressed than the rest of the group, and it seems as their comrades fell, they surrendered their clothing to those that were still alive. Dubinina had a piece of Krivonishchenko's wool trousers wrapped around her foot, and Zolotaryov was wearing Dubinina's faux fur coat and hat. In the inquest and medical examination that immediately followed their discovery, it was found the first 5 bodies had no life-threatening injuries and most likely died of hypothermia. Slobodin had a small skull fracture, but it was not deemed to be serious. The other 4 bodies were a completely different case. The injuries 3 of them had sustained were discovered to have been fatal. Zolotaryov and Dubinina had major chest fractures, and Thibodeau-Brignol had major skull damage. They had no external injuries related to the fractures, but the force necessary to cause the internal damage would be comparable to a car crash. All 3 were found to have tissue damage around their eyes, and Zolotaryov's eyes were gone. Dubinina, who was found face down in a small stream, had severe tissue damage around her mouth, and her tongue was missing. All of these facial traumas most likely were caused by putrefaction. There is a rumor on the internet that the group was found having bright orange color to their skin, but it is just that, an internet rumor. Originally, the indigenous Mansi people were suspected of attacking the group, but eventually that theory was dropped. No one could explain what drove these experienced outdoors people to cut themselves out of their tent without the proper clothing, let alone their shoes. Let's go over the most popular and the most likely theories. The Avalanche Theory definitely seems plausible at first, especially with the incident taking place on the slope of a snowy mountain in winter. However, although the tent was partially covered in snow by the time it was discovered by the search and rescue team, there was no evidence of an avalanche taking place in the area. In the hundreds of expeditions to the area since the time of the incident, conditions that could produce an avalanche have not been reported. Dyatlov was very experienced, and Zolotaryov was studying for his master's certificate in ski instruction and mountain hiking. It is unlikely they would set up camp in an avalanche-prone spot. Some conspiracy theorists like to theorize that a UFO scared the hikers from the tent. Often they pointed to this photograph. They hypothesized that it is either an alien face peering into the tent or bright lights in the sky. This theory seems to be supported by the fact that several geologists about 70 kilometers from the mountains saw some glowing and pulsating orbs flying in the direction of Kholat Syakhl on the evening of February 1st. It has been confirmed, however, that the Soviet armed forces were doing rocket launch testing in the area around that time. When someone is suffering from hypothermia, they often exhibit a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing. While their skin is actually freezing, the nerve endings are sending signals to the brain telling them their skin is burning. In an effort to combat the heat, they strip off their clothing. Some have suggested this is why many of the hikers were found significantly underdressed. However, it seems they left the tent underdressed to begin with. And as they froze to death, their clothes were commandeered by their friends who were still alive. This theory alleges that the campsite fell within the path of Soviet parachute mine exercises, and the hikers were awakened by explosions. In a panic, they fled the tent, running towards the tree line for cover, forgetting their shoes, and found themselves unable to get back to the tent for their supplies. The theory further states that after some of the hikers froze to death, their companions took their clothes and tried to flee, succumbing to injuries from a second round of parachute mines. In this version of the story, Simon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolevatov, and Yuri Krivonishchenko were KGB agents on a mission to undercover a cell of American CIA agents. Their mission was to photograph the CIA agents as well as deliver radioactive materials. But things didn't go as planned, and the CIA agents killed the group. This theory is somewhat supported by the fact that clothing items belonging to Krivonishchenko and Kolevatov were later tested and confirmed to be radioactive. It has been noted, although, that Krivonishchenko and Kolevatov were both involved in engineering. And in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, they very well could have come into contact with radioactive materials in their day-to-day lives. Also, the fact that Zolotaryov was a military veteran and significantly older than the rest of the group has been suggested to give this theory some weight. This theory mainly comes from a Discovery Channel documentary, Russian Yeti, the Killer Lives, and casts the Russian Yeti, or Mank, as the local Mansi people call it, as the culprit for killing the hikers. The show points to the fact that the group had made slits at about eye level in the tent, claiming they were probably looking out at the Yeti. They point to this photograph off of one of the hikers' rolls of film as absolute proof of a Yeti, but to me it just looks like someone bundled up for cold weather. They also made a large deal about Dubinina and her missing tongue, claiming that the Yeti stole it and ate it. If I were to believe this theory, I don't think such a large creature would kill so many only to take a tongue to eat. It is much more likely that the soft tissue of her face was gone due to putrefaction, as stated before. This theory states that infrasound might have been responsible for sudden unpleasant feelings among the group. It's believed that a wind phenomenon called Kármán Vortex Street could have produced a powerful and horrifying sound which induces an irrational fear in humans. Due to the topography of Kholat Syakhl, which is dome-shaped, the strong winds blowing through the pass could have been warped as they struck the slopes. Infrasound has been described as a frequency so low that the human ear cannot hear it, but it causes feelings of panic and dread. It's been hypothesized that many people that have had supposed paranormal experiences have actually been experiencing infrasound. I see this theory as pretty plausible, although no one has proven that infrasound happens during certain conditions in Dyatlov Pass. We have now arrived at the last and what I believe to be the most likely theory of what happened that night. This theory is that the hikers left the tent due to smoke from their stove. The stove was apparently custom built by Dyatlov himself. The theory goes that the group settled in for dinner, frying some ham and bacon. After the cooking was done, the chimney for the stove, seen here in this photograph, was removed. I can see this theory going a few ways. A. Something sparked up in the stove, causing the tent to fill with smoke. In an attempt to vent the smoke out, they would have cut slits at the top of the tent that could be easily repaired later. If the tent started filling with smoke and they couldn't see, maybe they had to cut themselves out, being unable to find the entrance and believing in the dark that their supplies had burned, so they would have to make their way to the only nearby cover, which of course was the tree line down the slope. B. Perhaps the stove was releasing carbon monoxide into the tent, causing a state of confusion and group hysteria in the hikers. It would be possible, with their diminished faculties, they were not thinking clearly and could have fled the tent in a stupor. C. A combination of the previous two. Some of the hikers were found with blood around their mouths, suggesting possible smoke inhalation. This is the theory that makes the most sense to me, even if it's not the most sensational. Regardless of what happened in the Ural Mountains on February 1st, 1959, the result is the same. 9 families buried and said goodbye to people they loved. Some of their friends and family are still alive today, and they are still greatly missed. Thank you so much for joining me on this trip under the veil. If you enjoy mysterious things like this, please make sure to click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you know when the next journey is about to start. Thank you so much, friends. Good night.